is going to be a win for Denis Lazavik, who sort of breaks back the serve. And after all that commotion, Eric, we do have a 3-2 match with the white pieces back for Denis Lazavik. He's right back in this.
Definitely, and I have to say, we weren't sure about going into that endgame, but he had an idea. I'm going to use that D pawn, distract white's pieces, and then pick off the kingside pawns. And Hikaru didn't have enough time to find if there was a resource. If it was drawing, not easy to find with 5 seconds.
Not at all. I could not see it. It looked like the engine was picking up a possibility to draw that position, but wasn't evident to any of the players. And a very good practical decision here as we're into the next game. And again, Eric, another position I think that Denis has got that's unique from the previous ones.
For sure. This NIMZO line, you give up the bishop pair as black, but you have these light squares. You have play against the center. See the knight c6. Black's going to bring a rook to d8. Yeah, Denis playing sharper as white. Hikaru's been playing the NIMZO for a long time, one of his main openings. Denis, we're used to him playing the Catalan, which avoids the NIMZO. So he's definitely varying up the openings here. And as white, what do you want to do eventually? You want to push this pawn to c4. Maybe you can build a center with d5. But additionally, open up this dark squared bishop.
Yeah, exactly. c4. You could also try to play to activate both of these bishops. The bishop on a2 doesn't look great. It's just supporting the c pawn. But it has a future where you play bishop to b1. And one of the reasons you mentioned d5 before is because of the strength of the b2 bishop. It looks like d5 is almost a concession or a step too far, but that is the idea in these positions, and perhaps an opportunity missed there, which is why the harsh evaluation of a question mark for queen c2.
Well, it is a big miss because white needs to open up the bishop, and you get active counterplay. If you play slow, look at what Hikaru played. You played rook d8 and then rook back to c8 right away. It might feel slow? No, because there's hanging pawns here. The c4 pawn is being attacked by 4 of black's pieces. A fault move might be rook d8, and white, you'd like to activate the bishops, but they're straddled with these weaknesses. The c4 pawn, very, very weak right now. It's tough to find a move. If you play d5 now, you're already regretting it because you had a better opportunity a couple moves ago. There's a pin on the file. This is already, I feel like, black's doing well.
Yeah, and the move d5 is usually what you play here because you want to maybe give up the c pawn in exchange for bishop takes f6. Double the pawns in front of the king. But as you're highlighting, d5 can be met by knight takes d5. A pin from the queen on c7 to the queen on c2, maybe highlighting why I was given that question mark by the computer. You don't have d5. c4 actually can't be defended here. So what, you play the move c5 perhaps? Well, not only is that giving up the d5 square, but the bishop on a6 comes alive, and the bishop on b2 will be blocked behind that d4 pawn, potentially for the rest of the game.
I can already tell Denis is quite inexperienced in this position because black has all the good options here. This is definitely backfired. You mentioned c5. Even an additional problem with that is it gives up the d5 square.
Exactly. And d5 looks like you kind of have to try that anyway.
But there's an idea here. Knight takes d5, bishop b1. Maybe reinforcing the queen and adding some checkmate threats.
Wow. Oh, that's a tricky idea from Denis.
This is a great find by Denis.
And you can see the poll there. 38% Denis Lazavik believers after a calculated d5 push. If there are some Denis supporters, got to make some noise right now. He needs it. He's trying to get back in this match here. 3-2. And this is obviously a critical moment. d5 played anyway. I did not appreciate the danger of bishop b1, Eric, but that's very tricky.
Bishop b1, you can play g6. It's very sharp. White's chances are much stronger with the queens on the board. So that's going to be tricky. But knight takes d5, bishop b1, threatening mate on h7. g6 maybe. There's still a bit of a pin. And the reason that pin is important is in some positions, the knight on e2 is loose.
Yeah, e5, I really like this move because, okay, you might think, well, why did I just allow the d pawn to become a protected pass pawn? Well, you can blockade that pawn at any point. It's not that dangerous right now. And you have all the pressure in the world on the c pawn. And if you win the c4 pawn, the d5 pawn will fall quickly after. So there's so much pressure from the knight a5, bishop a6, and the pieces on the c file that Hikaru's just worried about bishop takes f6, worried about the king side. You deal with those threats, and everything collapses on the queen side. So this is a battle of really trying to hold c4 for long enough to make significant threats for white. Question is, can Denis find them?
Yeah, I think white is understanding that at some point you might lose the c4 pawn, but if you can open up that dark squared bishop, rip open the king side while the queens are on the board, there's enough compensation. And that might mean bringing that queen to f5, targeting e5, f4 at the right moment, knight g3. Has to be very precise here because the easier position is to play for black.
Yep.
Structurally, all the targets on c4, easy moves like rook e8 coming up. And Denis, already down 2 minutes on the clock, has to find just an energetic move here. I think queen
queen f5.
Queen f5. I mean, it looks obvious. I'm just hitting e5, but it has to continue. Queen f5, rook e8. He has to continue playing energetically, find a way to activate the bishops. They're not meant to be passive like this.
Now, I mean, it's easy to suggest things like this, given the fact that we're just up here commentating, but queen f5 followed by f4, that could be a way to generate a lot of pressure on e5 and the knight on f6 behind it, even at the expense of the c-pawn. So if you're really trying to mix things up, queen f5, f4 is a way to try to do that, but it's risky, and we know Denis is a little bit risk-averse in terms of his play style.
Yeah, this is forcing him out of his comfort zone, but there's a problem here with his time management. Under a minute, if you do choose to open up the position, there's a much greater chance it's a mistake because you don't have time to calculate everything happening.
Exactly. Knight g3, not a bad move at all, but heavily, time was heavily invested into that move, and was it really worth it in the end?
Well, the big question here is, can black take on c4? Why would you attack it with 4 different pieces if you can't take it? Then that was a huge waste of time. Principal choice by Hikaru, taking on c4.
I mean, this c-file pin, it goes both ways, doesn't it? Now, all of a sudden, you can't take on a2 because of queen takes c7, and that's why that blue arrow making an appearance, although I will say, I think this move does make a lot of sense. It's important to play, though, because you have to get off of the c-file and actually make white react to bishop takes a2.
Additionally, queen d7 takes away the f5 square and introduces a threat of bishop takes a2. Then white's queen is hit.
Yep. And bishop b1 can be played, but there's no threat on h7 just yet. This is definitely an achievement.
Have to keep the queens on the board.
But you have to keep the queens on the board.
So automatic move, either queen b2, queen b1. b2 looks a bit weird because knight c4 with the fork.
Yep.
So queen b1, it's not pretty, but you
Is
can't
there an
afford.
idea to play queen b2, allow knight c4, sacrifice, take on f6? That's probably a little bit too much, but it at least comes to mind. But
I don't
actually
like this.
taking.
Oh, no, no, no.
This has to be wrong.
Has to be wrong. You're down a pawn. Black can play f6, shelter the g7 pawn, give some space to the king, and you're just looking at an endgame down 2.5 minutes, down a pawn with no threats.
Yeah, f6 looks really, really solid. Kicks the bishop, defends the g-pawn. You just wouldn't want to touch the g-pawn and play g6. You know, that's probably the that's one way to go out. You wouldn't be too proud of. But of course, defending that pawn with f6 does appear to make more sense. Now, the trickiness here is knight e7. I know it's not a threat, but even playing a move like rook to d1, it threatens the knight on d5, and you can't defend it with rook d8 because you can sack with knight e7 anyway. So that's the trick in the position that you just need to watch out for. Hikaru obviously well aware.
It's a trick in the position, but the problem is you also have back rank issues. So white needs an additional move to make space for the king because in a lot of positions you won't have time to play rook d1, rook takes d5.
Yeah, the rook on f8 is hit. Need a reaction here. Rook d8 looks...
Rook e8, rook d8 all look good to me.
Looks simple. And the knight can be kicked out with g6. The king also has an easy path into the position with king f7, king e6 in the future. Trades here would be great. And I do think it makes sense to start booting these pieces backwards.
g6 is huge. Knight d4 runs into rook e4. Knight going back to g3. Now, no more tricks.
Yeah. The knight on d5 covers the c7 square. So the entry point for the rook on the c-file is no good. The knight on a5 doesn't look amazing, but it will join the game eventually. And for now, the c-file you cannot penetrate.
Hikaru's really good with his knight, so I don't expect him to allow any exchange on a5 that messes up the pawn structure, gives white easy trades. Knight b3, try to find a way to bring the knight back, maybe b3 to d4. And in general, black's very safe on the light squares. Look at the color of the bishop on b4. That's why you see all of black's pieces, light squares.
Yeah, rook d1 here. Suddenly the knight on b3 doesn't have many squares, but that's why the a5 move was played to support the knight, and the rook from e8 can slide to a8, get behind that pawn. It's going to be counterplay needed here for white, and he's looking to play a move like knight e4 if you go rook a8, generate counterplay, but that a-pawn is really dangerous. I like the decision to go for it.
You have to go for it, and white can't really stop it. I mean, it's pushing all the way. The knight supports it, the rook supports it as well. Where's Denis's next move after king e7?
Yeah, the rook's going to come back. you're not fully stopping a3 here, but you can play knight c3 to take it.
Nice find with just 12 seconds. Hikaru obviously doesn't want to give up this knight. That pawn, the nice thing about the passed pawn, knights are bad at defending it. Denis is going to have to keep that knight on the queen side for the rest of the game, watching over that. That means Hikaru will have that knight of his own to roam around.
Knight c1, preventing knight a2. Now the thing is, even if you play a2, if white can sacrifice for that pawn...
There's a knight e2 threat.
Oh, that's right.
Knight e2. Ah, Denis sees it.
That's a big
why
one.
He couldn't take...
Now this will be an interesting position. What's going on here? Rook takes c1 was possible, but he decides to play it now. But there's rook takes c3.
This is just totally losing.
No,
because
but before he could have done this, and a1 would have had to happen. He could have sacked. Here he has to play the rook endgame. It's so much worse.
Well, the reason this is losing is white's rook is in the wrong spot to defend. You want the rook behind the pawn. In front, it's just out of the game. Hikaru can bring his king in, slowly get opposition, and pick off the rest of the pawns, and then waltz over the king, take away the rook.
The rook can just go back to a6. Beautiful technique, covering the pawn, and now you can just make progress. King takes f3.
And just walk the king over.
You just have to watch out for
maybe rook
takes
a5. Rook a5, cut off the king,
Beautiful.
very professional.
No, Hikaru has got this one under control, and he's going to bring that king over.
But there's a big moment missed there by Denis. Nice win by Hikaru. He had one moment.